I don't believe it was an independence movement for the better part of it at all. After my reading of let's say, the literature for this particular book, I don't believe it even one bit. Bharat is currently sitting on a powder keg. Name one part of the country which is untouched by or from both forms of colonialities that I've mentioned in the book. Worst part of this is that we are pushing our children into that particular camp, either through neglect or through deracination and rootlessness, or by telling them that education is ultimately meant only for a return on investment and nothing more. Sri Aurobindo accused the people of his generation, especially the Congress, of suffering from one disease, almost incurable disease. He called it Chakshulajja. You lack the guts to call a spade because you're worried about hurting sentiments. He's hurting your civilization, but what you care for are his sentiments. I wanted to stop writing the book. Discuss these uncomfortable realities with your children. Find a way to energize them. Never ask them to run away from a fight. You should be able to identify the Sutradhar and the puppets, both. I don't see this as a 2.5 war. I see this as a proper 3-front war. The 9th chapter makes for crucial reading because the kind of defenses that were given to the Mopla outrage will remind you of what is happening today. Nothing has changed. Even our responses have not changed. And that's the sad part. How do you then awaken this society which continues to sleep in such huge numbers? And the ones who are awake are being asked to shut up by others from within the same community. I've spoken on the second book, I think at least on about 7 or 6 occasions now. But the one thing that I would want people to take this away with in terms of the book and what is it that it's trying to convey, please try, and I do not suffer from any sense of false modesty. I am not one. Therefore, kindly take this particular suggestion on face value. Ignore the author once you start reading the book, because then you're going to constantly focus on the individual as opposed to the problem that I'm trying to present. I'm 100% sure that there may be any number of maybe logical, let's say, gaps or inconsistencies in the book. If people were to sit and look for it, they may find some errors of leaps of logic. Possible. That is why I'm trying to pepper the book with a lot of facts, so that at the very least you have the dots to connect and piece together. And still ask yourself if the big picture that you emerge with once you're done reading the book, is it that far from the big picture that I'm trying to present? There may be some differences in the contours here and there, but is my reading of history that far from what the facts present? In which case, what is the relevance of that particular period and that history to the current situation we live in? That's the question that you must ask yourself. The only request that I would want to make to the young members of the audience present here is, try not to make this particular movement and this initiative of any particular individual as an opportunity to deify the individual. This shouldn't translate into creating a cult or hero worship. That's a genuine request. Because then you stop looking for inconsistencies in the person's position. You become immune to the person's mistakes. And this is exactly the thing that I'm trying to urge readers to avoid and desist from, because we have not subjected our heroes to the kind of scrutiny that they ought to have been, especially during the so-called independence movement. I don't believe it was an independence movement for the better part of it at all. After my reading of let's say, the literature for this particular book, I don't believe it even one bit. The ones who fought for it were the revolutionaries who were completely sidelined and who have not been given their due. So try and approach this subject with the sobriety, with the objectivity, with the sense of urgency and emergency that it calls for. Because Bharat is currently sitting on a powder keg. As much as there is cause for hope, there is equally cause for serious concern. Name one part of the country which is untouched by or from both forms of colonialities that I've mentioned in the book. North, south, east, west, northeast, there's not a single direction that's left untouched. It's almost as if Bharat has become an infesting ground for sleeper cells of various forms of anti-Bharat forces. And the worst part of this is that we are contributing to that particular sleeper cell in droves. We are pushing our children into that particular camp, either through neglect or through deracination and rootlessness, or by telling them that education is ultimately meant only for a return on investment and nothing more. So what is being presented today is merely an acquisition of skill set or survival set, if not even skill set, as education. I'm merely asking you to revisit these notions. I am not in the race for popularity under any circumstances. So if the book ultimately leads to a situation where I become unpopular, I really don't care, because I think the message is beyond me. And this is ultimately for the preservation of this particular land's civilization and its way of life. So Sri Aurobindo accused the people of his generation, especially the Congress, of suffering from one disease, almost incurable disease. He called it Chakshulajja, which means you suffer from extreme political correctness to the point of being stupid, to the point of being suicidal and self-destructive. And therefore, you lack the guts to call a spade, because you're worried about hurting sentiments. He is hurting your civilization, but what you care for are his sentiments. Not just he, she is also equally hurting your civilization. Let's be equal. Or if there are 122 genders, all of them. I wanted to stop writing the book. At some point, I just said, I can't go through this. But the point is, if you can't even go through reading the literature, how are you going to handle what's coming your way? It's an eventuality. You can stall it, but can you eliminate it? I don't know. From the looks of it, that's not possible. The challenge is already out on the streets on a daily basis. By the time I was done with chapter 9, which dealt with all the riots from 1921 to 24, the only question that I was asking myself is, what happened to the valor of the Marathas and the Sikhs and everybody else? Where did it go? It did not vanish, by the way. Barendranath Ghosh, the brother of Aurobindo Ghosh, was effectively inspiring people with the song Anand se Vande Matram, Bhagavad Gita, Swami Vivekananda, and one of the leaders of the revolutionary movement was the brother of Vivekananda. These people understood the importance of Kshatra, and Kshatra. That is what is sorely missing. So I genuinely hope that by the time people are done reading this book, the impact is as much, if not more, as was the impact after I left watching Kashmir Files. Because that reflected one particular incident or one particular episode, but that it forms a continuum in the continuing Hindu genocide is something that you need to be able to understand. The scale of it, the ferocity of it, the ruthlessness of it, and the dehumanization of it needs to be understood. So my only suggestion of the youngsters here, no disrespect to your energy and youthful enthusiasm. Don't make thug life videos. After you read the book, I have a humble request. No gangster look, chain, cigar, nothing. I don't want it. Because one, the sentiment and the energy that I'm trying to transmit through the book gets lost. It needs to produce Kshatra and Raudra and a sense of commitment and nothing else. Which means the sense of purpose must become razor sharp. Ever since the book has been launched, people have been asking me to jump from one podcast to another podcast. I have zero interest in it anymore. I don't see the point in repeating myself. Whatever I've said has been conveyed with evidence and material and emotion in the book. Read it. Discuss these uncomfortable realities with your children. Find a way to energize them. Never ask them to run away from a fight. Please never ask them to run away from a fight. Teach them to either take a beating or give one, but never run away. Under no circumstances. When Praveen Nettaru was beheaded, the unfortunate reality was because the family did not have the support system that it should have got from the community, and therefore they felt, हम अपने बच्चों से कह रहे हैं, हिंदुत्व को छोड़ दो, because it won't let you live a peaceful life. It comes at the expense of your peace and your life. That is exactly the message of the beheader. And that message was conveyed loud and clear. I wish as a community we were able to give the support to that family that it deserved, that the sacrifice of that boy shall not go in vain. Okay, you arrest PFI. Simi was also arrested in the past. So, it was banned. All of this happened. So what? What next? That's one of the things that I have specifically addressed in the book. A Raktabija Rakshas cannot be eliminated by killing one particular form. The seed must be eliminated. Because the Raktabija Rakshas will morph into a new entity and give it a very democratic sounding name. Popular Front of India, apparently. Popular Front of India. Students' movement of India. This is because of the cover fire given to the jihadis by the left ecosystem. Dismantle the left ecosystem and the color of the jihadi will be out in its full glory, and then you can deal with him and her properly. The left is the culprit because it is defending the culprit. The left needs to be eliminated from this particular country in whatever form it exists, as long as it translates to supporting in any manner Islamofascism or Christian fascism. Any kind of evangelism that poses a threat to the native faith system of this country needs to be confronted. What do you think is happening in Andhra Pradesh today? Native education system has been completely done away with. That's exactly what the British man did. Telugu education system is being done away with. You should be able to identify the Sutradhar and the puppets, both. That clarity is important. I don't see this as a 2.5 war. I see this as a proper 3-front war. Because at the very least, there are some conventions to be observed by both parties when it's a proper battle in terms of the Geneva Convention and if it's an external aggression. What are the rules of decorum here? How do you define what happens within? The only way you can define it to your own detriment is to call it a civil war. Because the moment you call it a civil war, you are legitimizing it in a certain way, because now you are effectively saying Bharat as a country is up for grabs by people within. Because civil war shows an internal struggle, as if it's like the American Civil War. That's the extent of the problem. So my suggestion is pay very close attention to the extracts in the book. I have underscored relevant portions. The 9th chapter makes for crucial reading because the kind of defenses that were given to the Mopla outrage will remind you of what is happening today. Nothing has changed. Even our responses have not changed. And that's the sad part. By the time I was done writing the conclusion on the 20th of June at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. in fact, early in the morning, I knew one thing for a fact. If at all there was any notion in my head that this was remotely an academic exercise, I'm crystal clear it's no more an academic exercise. It is certainly not an exercise in self-edification under any circumstances, because it comes at a huge price in terms of my, let's say, personal commitments, in terms of my ability to even sleep properly, and in terms of what it does to you to realize that how do you then awaken this society which continues to sleep in such huge numbers? The very population of this particular community is the problem, because the bulk of the population is sleeping. And the ones who are awake, not woke, awake, are being asked to shut up by others from within the same community, because apparently we are the ones posing problems for communal harmony. I think the time for beating around the bush and circumlocution is past. Khilafat ended in December 24. As I said before, 1947, there was a reality. With slogans being raised in Pune under a so-called Hindu government, or at least a so-called non-left government, and riots in Delhi and whatnot, ask yourself if you're better off or worse off compared to the 1900s, by the way. In independent India, not Bharat. It's not Bharat according to me still. It is my position that our position today is worse off compared to the 1900s because of all the artificial filters that have been imposed on you, which prevent you from even voicing what is happening. So please read this book with a sense of purpose. I'm trying to put off the writing of the 3rd book for a few months, simply because I need an energy break. I seriously need it. My practice commitments and everything else already consume a lot of my time and energy. I'm not pessimistic. I'm certainly not pessimistic. I can see a lot of reasons for hope. I want it to crystallize and convert into a critical mass. It needs to become a people's movement. Please embrace this. Time has thrown a challenge at the Hindu society once more. And I hope we rise up to the occasion, at least in self-interest, if not civilizational interest.